1895 Rome, the priest who hunted demons. Until the day one, dressed in the skin of his own wife, under the dim glow of a flickering candle, the cobblestone streets of 1895 Rome seemed to whisper secrets that no church bell could ever drown. The city pulsed with devotion and deceit, holy prayers echoing through marble cathedrals while sins rotted beneath them. Among the shadows walked a man whose name, once spoken with reverence, would soon be cursed in silence. Father Aurelio Santini, the priest who claimed to hunt demons. He was known for his piercing eyes and his sermons that burned with the conviction of divine fire. To the faithful, he was a savior of souls. To the fearful, a man too close to the darkness he vowed to destroy. Rome was a city drowning in superstition, where whispers of possession and witchcraft still lingered in alleyways and confessionals. And Father Santini, obsessed with cleansing evil, believed he alone could purge it from the living. But what no one knew, what no one dared to imagine, was that the greatest demon he would ever face was not a creature of hell. It was a man who wore the skin of righteousness, his own reflection. The story you are about to hear was buried deep in the Vatican's forgotten archives, a story so grotesque and blasphemous that even those who discovered it swore to never speak again. It begins with a single exorcism gone wrong. A young woman, pale as the moon, convulsing on the marble floor of Santa Lucia's chapel. Her screams tore through the holy air as Father Santini commanded, "In the name of God, I cast you out." But when her eyes snapped open, what stared back was not a demon, it was recognition, a secret she knew about him. That night, something broke inside the priest. He disappeared for 3 days, and when he returned, his sermons changed. He spoke not of salvation, but of purification. His confessions grew longer, his nights sleepless. The villagers whispered that he had seen the devil himself, and that perhaps the devil had not left him. They called him the demon hunter of Rome, and people from distant towns came begging for his help. Possessions, hauntings, dark omens, he accepted them all. Yet for every soul he claimed to save, something within him decayed a little more. He began to keep relics from his rituals, pieces of cloth, locks of hair, even drops of blood, convinced they held power over evil, or perhaps trophies of it. As the winter fog descended upon the eternal city, a chilling rumor spread. Someone had been found in the outskirts, skinned, mutilated, arranged in a grotesque imitation of a saint's statue. Rome trembled. Father Santini took it as a sign. The devil was near, and he vowed to hunt it down once and for all. But what he would uncover would defy everything holy he believed in, because, as the whispers claimed, one night, one man walked through the streets dressed in the skin of his own wife. And if you stay until the end of this story, you'll discover what the church buried, and why some say the man who hunted demons eventually became one himself. So listen closely, because the walls of Rome still remember his screams, and believe me, no one was prepared for what they discovered. Rome in 1895 was a city divided between sanctity and sin. The Vatican's influence reached into every alley, every whisper, every secret confession. Yet beneath the gilded domes and marble saints, something darker stirred. A quiet war between the church's holy men and the ghosts of an empire that refused to die. The city's soul was torn. One half devoted to the heavens, the other haunted by ancient demons. It was a time of transition, when electricity had just begun to hum through the streets and the gas lamp still burned with a trembling, uncertain light. The poor huddled in cold tenements while cardinals feasted behind locked gates. Every bell toll echoed over layers of forgotten graves, for Rome was built upon Rome, its history stacked like bones in a crypt. The people said that the ground itself was cursed, soaked with centuries of blood and betrayal. In that uneasy twilight between faith and fear, Father Aurelio Santini found his calling. The church had begun to fear the spreading fascination with spiritualism. Seances, mediums, occult societies flourishing in the salons of noble families. They called it heresy. They called it temptation. But Santini saw it as a challenge to his divine mission, to cleanse the city of everything unholy that crawled from the shadows of human doubt. His small parish stood on the edge of the Trastevere district, where narrow streets tangled like veins through the heart of old Rome. The walls were damp with centuries of moisture, the air thick with incense and the faint scent of decay. It was here, in this forgotten corner, that he performed his rituals, half sanctioned by the church, half driven by obsession. He believed evil could take form, wear a body, speak through the innocent, and he believed it was his duty to tear it out by any means necessary. The locals feared his chapel. They said they heard screams at night, voices not quite human, prayers that twisted into cries. Children crossed themselves when passing the gates. The faithful came seeking miracles, and some left healed. Others were never seen again. Rumors spread of strange marks burned into the altar, of relics missing from the catacombs, of a book bound in something that wasn't leather. Yet for all his darkness, Rome adored its demon hunter. Newspapers praised his holy courage. The Vatican tolerated his unorthodox methods because fear kept the masses faithful. Every exorcism became a performance, every prayer a battle cry against the unseen. But behind the spectacle, something was festering. The city itself seemed to mirror his descent. That winter, fog rolled in thicker than anyone could remember, swallowing the streets in a pale shroud. Horses refused to move past certain corners. Windows rattled, though there was no wind. And in the heart of it all, at the old monastery near the Tiber River, Father Santini claimed to feel a presence watching him. He described it in his journals as a cold breath beneath the altar, like the sigh of something ancient awakening. The church dismissed his fears as exhaustion, but late one night, while Rome slept beneath its veil of mist, a messenger arrived from the Vatican carrying a sealed letter marked "Urgent." Inside was a single sentence written in Latin: "The devil wears flesh." From that moment, Santini's faith twisted into obsession. He began tracing the lineage of families he believed were cursed, reading forbidden manuscripts that spoke of possession not by spirits, but by blood. He searched the catacombs for signs of corruption, convinced that the evil he hunted was not supernatural at all, but born from the sins of men disguised as saints. And as his investigation deepened, the boundaries between holy and profane began to blur. The same streets where he had once given blessings now seemed to whisper his name in mockery. He would walk the length of Via Giulia under the pale moon, his cassock soaked with rain, muttering prayers to no one who listened. Rome had become a mirror of his mind, beautiful, ancient, and cracking under the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. Somewhere within its labyrinth of churches and catacombs, the truth waited for him. And when he found it, it would consume him completely. Father Aurelio Santini was born into silence. His mother, a seamstress for the Vatican, died giving birth to him beneath the echo of church bells. His father, a stonemason, was crushed by the very cathedral he helped build. The boy was raised by monks who taught him that pain was purification, that suffering was God's most intimate form of love. And so, from his first breath, Aurelio learned to confuse agony with faith. By the time he took his vows, he was already known as the priest who never smiled. His eyes, cold and calculating, carried the weight of someone who had seen too much too soon. He believed that evil was not merely temptation, but infection, something that could be cut out, burned away, or destroyed. And though his words were filled with scripture, his voice trembled with fury more than mercy. But even darkness, he discovered, can love. Her name was Lucia Ferri. the woman who would become both his salvation and his undoing. She was not a nun nor a saint, but the daughter of a bookseller near the Campo de Fiori. Her laughter was soft, the kind that made even the dust of old books seem to dance. She tended to the poor, taught children to read, and spoke to Aurelio with a tenderness he had long forgotten existed. They met when he came to bless her dying mother. She had no fear of him, though others crossed themselves at his approach. "You look for demons," she once told him, "but you never see the angels standing beside you." He wanted to dismiss her words as blasphemy, yet something inside him broke open, like a stained glass window cracking under light. Over months, their meetings became confessions, hers of sorrow, his of doubt. She listened when he spoke of the darkness he felt rising within, of the voices that haunted his prayers. She told him it was not the devil he fought, but his own reflection. Still, when she placed her hand upon his, he felt, for the first time, not cursed, but human. But Rome had no mercy for priests who felt too deeply. Whispers spread of his closeness to the bookseller's daughter. The Vatican sent envoys to observe his conduct. Parishioners stopped attending Mass, afraid that sin had touched their holy man, and Lucia, though unafraid, began to sense that something around them had shifted. Objects moved in her home when she was alone. Candles sputtered and died when she spoke his name. Then came the letter, unsigned, sealed with black wax, slipped beneath her door. It read, "He does not hunt demons, he feeds them." From that day she noticed changes in Aurelio. His sermons grew violent, his prayers more desperate. He spoke of seeing shadows follow him, of hearing her voice in dreams, though she had not spoken. He began carrying a small blade inside his cassock to cut away temptation. When she begged him to stop, he only whispered, "Evil hides in what we love most." Lucia feared for him, yet she could not leave. She felt bound to his torment, drawn to the sorrow that radiated from him like a dying star. One night, as the bells of St. Peter's tolled midnight, he appeared at her door, drenched in rain, trembling, eyes wild with a terror she had never seen. "It's here," he whispered. "The demon. It's wearing a face I know." She took his hand, trying to calm him, unaware that her touch sealed her fate. For in that moment, as thunder rolled across the city, Father Santini decided that to save her soul, he might have to destroy her body. Those who knew them would later say their love was not human, it was a confession written in blood. And when their story ended, no one could tell whether it was mercy or madness that drove him to what came next. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came from beneath the chapel floor. It was during a cold March morning, the kind where Rome's mist clings to the stones like breath on a mirror. Father Santini had been kneeling in prayer before the crucifix when he heard it, a faint tapping sound, rhythmic, deliberate. At first, he thought it was the pipes, or perhaps a rat scurrying between the cracks. But then it came again, 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more, as though someone or something was answering his prayers from below. He pressed his ear to the cold marble and felt a vibration, like a heartbeat pulsing through the foundation. When he lifted his head, he noticed something strange, a thin line of blackened wax seeping through a fissure in the stone. It smelled faintly of myrrh and iron, the scent of old rituals. His fingers trembled as he scraped at it with a nail, revealing an inscription carved deep into the floor. Not Latin, older, angular and cruel, like letters written by a trembling hand. That same evening he summoned his assistant, Brother Matteo, a young novice with a quiet fear of his mentor. They pried open the floor near the altar, and what they found was not the usual earth or bone of saints, but a narrow passage descending into darkness. The air that rose from below was heavy and sweet, carrying the odor of decay and candle smoke. A hidden chamber. Father Santini lit a lantern, its weak flame shivering as they descended the stone steps. The walls were lined with symbols etched in soot and blood, their meaning long forgotten. At the bottom, they reached a small room no larger than a tomb, where an altar stood covered in a sheet of red cloth. On it lay a single object, a woman's veil, yellowed by time, spotted with what looked like dried blood. "Whose is this?" Matteo whispered. Santini said nothing. His eyes had fixed on the symbol painted above the altar, a serpent coiled around a cross, its fangs sinking into the wood. He knew it. He had seen it once before. In Lucia's home, carved into the back of a wooden box her father kept locked. A mark she had never been able to explain. He told no one of the connection, not the church, not Matteo, not even Lucia. Instead, he ordered the chamber sealed and swore his assistant to silence. Yet from that night on, his sermons turned darker. He began to speak of hidden faiths, of demons that do not possess the flesh but are born from it. His voice carried an edge of terror, as if every word were pulled from something he had seen and wished to forget. Days later, another sign appeared. In the confessional, carved into the wood where penitents once knelt, were the same angular letters that had glowed beneath the chapel floor. When he traced them with his finger, a splinter pierced his skin, and the blood that fell formed the same pattern on the wood. The whispers returned. People said the demon hunter had awoken something, that his hunt had turned inward. Lucia came to him, her face pale with fear, saying she dreamt of being trapped beneath the church, surrounded by whispers calling her name. When he asked what they said, she only wept and whispered back, "They said it wasn't me who would die first." That night, Santini wrote in his journal, "The devil no longer hides in shadow. He has found a home beneath my altar." And somewhere in the depths of that hidden chamber, something unseen began to stir again. 3 knocks, soft but certain, echoing through the hollow stone. The following weeks brought a suffocating dread to the parish. The faithful came less often, whispering that the church had become cursed. Even the candles seemed to burn lower, as though afraid of what their light might reveal. Father Santini, once regarded as a warrior of faith, now looked hollowed out, his cheeks gaunt, his eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. He had begun locking the chapel doors at night, claiming it was to keep out thieves. But Brother Matteo knew better. The priest was keeping something in. Each night, Santini descended into the sealed chamber, lantern in hand, to kneel before that blood-stained veil. He prayed, but not to God. His mutterings had changed. Half scripture, half something else. Words older than Latin, phrases that twisted the air like a fevered wind. The walls of the chamber seemed to breathe when he spoke, and sometimes he swore he heard a woman's voice answering from the dark. Meanwhile, Lucia suffered her own torment. The townspeople had turned on her, branding her the witch who bewitched the priest. Stones were thrown at her window, and merchants refused to serve her. She went to the church for help, but no priest would see her, not even Aurelio. He sent letters instead, written in ink so heavy it bled through the page. "Stay away from me, for the evil follows your scent," he wrote. "Do not let it in." But it was already too late. One evening, a group of villagers came to the rectory demanding to know why a woman's cries had been heard from the chapel after midnight. Father Santini denied it, though his hands trembled. They accused him of hiding a sinner, of consorting with the devil he claimed to hunt. He cursed them in return, invoking verses of judgment that made them recoil in terror. The next morning, one of the men who had confronted him was found dead by the riverbank, his skin pale and eyes wide open, as though he had drowned in fear. Word spread like wildfire. The Vatican dispatched investigators, stern men in black robes who carried crucifixes like weapons. They demanded access to the chapel, but Santini refused, claiming that the sacred rites inside were not for the unclean to witness. When they threatened excommunication, he only whispered, You cannot cast out what you do not understand. Brother Matteo tried to intervene. He found the courage one night to follow the priest into the crypt. What he saw turned his faith to ash. Santini knelt before the altar, the woman's veil draped across his shoulders like a relic. Around him, candles burned in a circle, their flames bending inward. On the stone floor he had drawn the same serpent sigil, but this time in fresh blood. "What are you doing?" Matteo cried. "Saving her," Santini whispered, not turning. "They called her unholy, they cast her aside. But God would not allow an innocent soul to be damned by men's cruelty." His voice trembled. "If he will not free her, then I will." Matteo fled, swearing he would expose the blasphemy. But the next day he vanished. Only his rosary remained, found beside the steps leading down to the hidden chamber. The injustice deepened like a wound. The church branded Santini a heretic, yet he believed himself a martyr. In his mind, he was avenging the purity of a soul wronged by hypocrisy. Every sermon became an accusation, every prayer a curse. The city that once hailed him now feared him, and as the bells tolled that Sunday, echoing across a sky the color of lead, Father Santini looked out at the empty pews and whispered to himself, "They never wanted salvation, only someone to burn." He turned toward the altar, where the cracks in the marble seemed to widen like mouths opening in silent laughter. Something inside him, faith, reason, humanity, snapped. And in that fracture, the demon he had hunted all his life finally found its home. The storm came without warning. Thunder rolled across the city like the voice of an angry god, and the rain fell in relentless sheets that blurred the line between sky and earth. Inside the chapel, Father Santini stood before the altar, trembling, his cassock soaked and clinging to his skin. He had spent the last 3 nights in the crypt, fasting, praying, waiting for a sign. What came instead was a stench, sweet, rotting, unmistakably human. He followed it down the staircase, lantern quivering in his hand. The air grew heavy, thick with decay and incense. The chamber, once silent, now echoed with faint scratching. When he reached the bottom, the sight froze his blood. The red cloth had been torn from the altar. The woman's veil was gone, and in its place lay something wrapped in parchment, sealed with the serpent symbol drawn in fresh crimson. Santini hesitated. His breath caught as he broke the seal. Inside he found a lock of hair, black, smooth, familiar. Beneath it, a piece of skin, thin and pale, etched with a mark that made his knees buckle. It was a small birthmark, one he had traced countless times with his fingers. Lucia's. He dropped the lantern. The glass shattered, flames licking the edges of the cloth. Smoke filled the room, and through that haze he saw movement, a shadow pressed against the far wall, writhing, almost human. The walls seemed alive, pulsing with whispers that crawled into his ears like worms. "She's here." The voice wasn't his own. "You called her, now she won't leave." He stumbled back up the stairs, coughing, his mind unraveling with every echo of that voice. Rain hammered the stained glass windows as he reached the chapel. The crucifix above the altar loomed, its face distorted by flickering candlelight. "Show me!" he cried, slamming his fist against the marble. "Show me where she is!" And the answer came, not from heaven but from the organ. A single note played, though no one sat at the keys, then another. A slow, deliberate melody, Lucia's favorite hymn, the same one she used to hum while cleaning her mother's shop. His heart pounded as he turned toward the loft. She was standing there, or something that looked like her, drenched, motionless, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. Her head tilted slowly, and though her face was shadowed, he could see the glint of her eyes, hollow, reflective, like glass. "Lucia?" His voice cracked. "What have they done to you?" She did not answer. Instead, she raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the confessional. He followed her gesture. every step echoing through the empty church. When he reached the booth, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air reeked of iron. He pulled it open and gasped. There, nailed to the wooden wall, hung the missing veil. But beneath it, carved into the panels, was something new, the serpent sigil intertwined with his own name, Aurelio. Around it, written in Lucia's delicate handwriting, were the words, "He wears what he loves. He saves what he destroys." He stumbled back, shaking, clutching the sides of the confessional. He didn't hear the figure behind him descend the steps. He didn't see the dark trail of wet footprints forming a path from the organ to where he stood. But when he turned, Lucia was gone. Only the faint scent of her perfume lingered, a scent that should have been impossible. The next morning, the rain stopped. But when the villagers came to the chapel, they found the doors sealed from within. Father Santini was nowhere to be seen. Only his journal lay open on the altar, a single line scrawled across the page. "She is not dead. She is beneath my skin." And though no one ever found her body, some swore they saw a figure walking the streets that night, a priest, his face half hidden, his hands gloved even in the heat. And if you listened closely, they said you could still hear 2 sets of footsteps. 3 days later, when the rain finally ceased, a silence fell over Trastevere, a silence so deep it seemed to smother the city. The chapel remained locked, its windows dark, yet at dawn, smoke was seen rising from its chimney. When a group of villagers forced the doors open, they found Father Santini kneeling before the altar, motionless, his hands clasped in prayer. At first glance, they thought he was alive, but when they touched his shoulder, his body collapsed forward, empty robes and flesh cold as marble. The scene defied understanding. There was no blood, no wound, yet the expression frozen on his face was one of unspeakable terror. Around him, candles burned in perfect symmetry, and behind the altar, the serpent sigil had been redrawn, not in soot or blood, but in what looked like ash mixed with oil. Inside the coiled symbol, a new phrase had been written in Latin. "Corpus meum non est meum." My body is not my own. The investigators from the Vatican returned, this time with orders to seal the parish and recover all artifacts within. But what they found deepened the mystery instead of solving it. In the crypt below the chapel, they discovered a wall that had been broken open. Behind it, a second chamber, smaller, older, and colder than the first. On the far side of that room stood a single mirror framed in black iron, covered with cloth. When they removed the covering, several of them gasped. The reflection in the mirror did not show the men standing before it. It showed Father Santini, alive, breathing, kneeling as though still praying. And behind him a woman's shape, pale and faceless, resting her hand upon his shoulder. The more they looked, the more the glass seemed to ripple, as if something inside were trying to breathe through it. The lead investigator ordered the mirror to be shattered, but the first hammer strike bounced off without leaving a mark. They left it untouched. By sunset, the Vatican declared the site forbidden. The records were sealed, and yet one of the investigators, a man named Cardinal Neri, could not let the matter rest. In his private diary, he wrote of what he had found among Santini's belongings, a folded page torn from a confessional notebook. On it, in a woman's handwriting, were just 5 words. "I forgive you. I'm still here." Rumors began to spread among the clergy that Santini had not died at all, that what lay in the chapel was merely his shell. Some whispered that he had succeeded in transferring the demon into himself, or worse, into the woman he loved. Others claimed that on certain nights the mirror glowed faintly from within, revealing 2 figures intertwined, one praying, the other watching. Years later, when the monastery was finally demolished, workers uncovered something buried beneath the foundation, a set of bones that did not belong to any man. The rib cage was smaller, the skull fractured, but wrapped around it, as though in embrace, were the remains of a priest's cassock, its fabric fused into the bone itself. The foreman ordered the site closed immediately, but one worker before leaving swore he heard a whisper rise from the pit, soft and steady, like a prayer carried through stone. He wears what he loves. And from that day on, no church in Rome dared to speak Father Santini's name aloud again, for the story of the demon hunter had become something far worse, a mirror that reflected back the sin of every soul that dared to look. Years after the events were buried beneath Vatican secrecy, fragments of Father Santini's story began to resurface. Not through the church, but through private letters and stolen archives. A historian named Lucia Ferraro, working in the archives of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, stumbled upon a file labeled simply Archivum Umbrae, 1895. Inside were dozens of documents, many half-burned, all linked to exorcisms conducted between 1887 and 1895. And at the center of every page appeared the same initials, A.S. Antonio Santini. Lucia noticed something unsettling. Every case Santini handled ended in disappearance, either of the possessed, the witnesses, or the records themselves. His notes were meticulous, written in a mixture of Latin, Italian, and ciphered phrases that referenced something called the ninth veil. In one surviving page, Santini described it as the final illusion between man and the thing that wears him. As Lucia dug deeper, she found a pattern that chilled her. The Vatican had officially condemned a heretical sect in the mid-1800s known as the Order of the Flayed Saints. This group believed that divine truth could be revealed only when the human soul was freed from its mask of flesh. Their rituals reportedly involved removing the skin of victims while chanting prayers of rebirth. The sect had been eradicated, or so the church claimed. But Santini's personal writings suggested otherwise. He spoke of infiltrating the remnants of this order under Vatican command, of finding a relic they worshipped, a mirror, forged in the 15th century, said to contain the reflection of a soul torn from its body. He called it Speculum Demonis. And according to his journal, the mirror wasn't just an artifact, it was a prison. One note, dated just weeks before his death, described his final mission. "She carries their mark. She is both vessel and victim. I will not let them take her." Scholars would later theorize that she referred to Maria, the mysterious woman from the confessional. But there was something else hidden in his final pages, a passage encrypted with symbols that Lucia painstakingly decoded. It read, "When flesh meets reflection, truth is devoured." The implications were staggering. The mirror found beneath Santini's chapel wasn't a random discovery, it was planted. A Vatican-backed operation had been conducted to recover it, but Santini, after learning its true nature, defied orders. He believed the artifact was alive, feeding on those who gazed into it. His rebellion made him a threat. Lucia's investigation didn't go unnoticed. Within days, her access to the archives was revoked, and her Vatican credentials were suspended. Yet she had already made copies of everything. One night, as she left her apartment in Rome, she felt a strange presence behind her, a faint sound, like a whisper sliding along glass. When she turned, she saw her reflection in a window. But it wasn't her face looking back. In her final recorded message, found days later in her study, Lucia's voice trembles as she says, "I understand now. The mirror doesn't show who we are. It shows what waits to take our place." Hidden correspondence between Vatican officials confirms that Lucia's case was quietly dismissed, her death attributed to psychological distress. But sealed memos from the same year mention the relocation of a black-framed mirror to a subterranean vault beneath St. Peter's Basilica, marked with a single Latin phrase, prohibitus ad aeternum, forbidden for eternity. Those who've seen the vault's inventory say the mirror still stands there, veiled in white cloth, guarded day and night, and sometimes, when the air grows cold in those tunnels, guards claim they hear two faint voices whispering prayers in Latin, one of a man, one of a woman, echoing from behind the wall. The revelation came not through the Vatican, but from an unexpected source, a private letter written by Cardinal Bellarmino to Pope Leo XIII, sealed in 1896 and unearthed by accident during a renovation in 2022. The letter S tone was urgent, almost panicked. It spoke of an event so grave that the foundations of the Holy See would tremble if the truth were to be known. According to the Cardinal's account, Father Santini had gone rogue. He had defied direct orders to surrender the mirror known as Speculum Demonis. Instead, he took it to his personal quarters in the parish house of San Bartolomeo, claiming he had to end the voice within it. The Vatican dispatched a small team of investigators, 2 priests and a medical examiner, to retrieve it. None of them returned. For months afterward, locals reported strange phenomena near the church. Candles burning without flame, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and the unmistakable scent of iron, blood, lingering in the air even after daily cleanings. The parish was sealed, declared unfit for worship. But what happened inside those walls was only partially recorded. A fragment from Santini's last diary entry reads, "She no longer speaks. She moves, but not with breath. Her skin hums the prayers I taught her. I begged her to stop, but the mirror would not release her." Scholars long debated what he meant, until the recovered forensic report from 1895 revealed the horrifying truth. Inside the rectory, investigators had found 2 bodies, or rather what appeared to be 2 forms, intertwined. One belonged to Father Santini. The other was unrecognizable. The remains were wrapped in human skin, stitched crudely together, the features resembling a woman's face stretched across what had once been the priest's own. The coroner described it as a perfect inversion, the priest wearing the flesh of the woman sealed within him. Next to them stood the mirror, shattered into 9 pieces. Each shard reflected a different angle of the room, except for one which reflected nothing at all. It was said that even under candlelight, that single fragment remained pitch black, as if it had absorbed all reflection. The official Vatican record declared the deaths a result of blasphemous ritual inversion. The mirror was confiscated and locked away, but the secret documents recovered decades later revealed a darker possibility. The mirror was not shattered by accident. It was broken by Santini himself. His final note, scrawled in blood on the chapel wall, read, "Only one can wear the truth." Lucia Ferraro's analysis of this phrase led to the most disturbing conclusion of all. Through her linguistic reconstruction, she proposed that Santini had attempted to trap the demonic entity within himself, to save Maria, or perhaps to silence it forever. But something went wrong. The mirror did not contain the demon, it mirrored it. And when Santini faced it, he didn't banish the entity. He became it. Evidence supports this theory. Contemporary witnesses reported seeing a figure in priestly garments walking through the streets of Trastevere weeks after Santini's supposed death. Those who claimed to have seen him said he looked reborn, but wearing a mask of grief. One woman insisted that when she approached him, he smiled, and his skin seemed to ripple like candlelight dancing across water. The Vatican's internal correspondence mentions an Entity 9, designated as the 9th and final manifestation of what they called the flayed saint phenomenon. In one report, an unnamed exorcist wrote, "It speaks in his voice." It knows the names of all who gaze into its reflection. It wears flesh as others wear cloth. By the early 1900s, the Church had quietly rewritten Santini's history, labeling him a heretic and suppressing all mention of his work. His parish was demolished, the foundation salted, and a new building constructed over the ruins. But strange reports continued to surface, priests hearing whispers in confessional booths, parishioners swearing they saw a figure in the shadows of the altar, a man whose face shifted between sorrow and horror. Modern Vatican archivists who have reviewed Lucia's files confirm that the mirror remains sealed beneath St. Peter's Basilica. But one internal memo from 1963, declassified only recently, ends with a chilling note. Containment unstable. Reflections in the lower vault exhibit responsive behavior, recommend relocation or termination. There is no record of what decision was made. No one knows where the mirror is today or whether it was ever destroyed. But one thing is certain. Every priest assigned to that same underground sector since 1895 has requested transfer within 6 months, citing disturbances during prayer. One even claimed that during confession he saw a figure kneeling behind the lattice, its voice soft, pleading, "Forgive me, Father, for I have worn her too long." History often hides its deepest horrors, not in what it remembers, but in what it forces itself to forget. The story of Father Santini is no longer a simple tale of a priest and a demon. It is the mirror of an era that blurred the line between faith and fear, mercy and madness. In 1895, the Church was an empire built on obedience. Every sin could be forgiven, but not every truth could be spoken. And when that truth began to scream from behind locked chapel doors, it was buried under the sanctity of silence. What happened to Santini was not just possession, it was transformation. He became the embodiment of a conflict that defined his century, the collision between science, faith, and the human need to control what terrifies us. His obsession with purging evil at all costs reflected a wider sickness of the time, a world terrified of what it could not understand. To banish darkness, men like Santini became it. Think of what that means for us now. How many demons in history were never creatures of hell, but the cries of those silenced, misjudged, or consumed by a system that demanded obedience above compassion? Santini's descent mirrors countless forgotten souls. Women accused of witchcraft, the mentally ill confined to asylums, the enslaved who dared to dream of freedom. In every century there were exorcisms not of spirits, but of conscience. When Lucia Ferraro uncovered those fragments of truth, she said something that still echoes. Evil does not vanish, it changes hosts. Perhaps that is the real curse the priest unleashed. The entity was never confined to the mirror or the flesh. It moved into the legacy itself, surviving in our fascination, in the stories we retell to make sense of our fears. Every time his name is spoken, the reflection flickers again, reminding us that history's monsters were often born from virtue twisted too tight. It's easy to condemn Santini, to call him insane, to brand him cursed, but imagine the weight he carried, a man devoted to saving souls, only to realize that the line between salvation and damnation was drawn by trembling hands. His tragedy was believing he could purify darkness without understanding that the moment he touched it, it became part of him. And yet, beneath the horror lies a warning more relevant than ever. In every age, there are those who claim to hunt demons, when in truth, they are hunting people. The mirror may have shattered, but its lesson endures. When we fight what we fear without compassion, we risk becoming the thing we despise. So when you look back on this story, don't just see a priest and a demon. See a reflection of us, our history, our shadows, our hunger for control. The echo of Father Santini's final words. Only one can wear the truth. Still lingers, not as a curse, but as a question. Who in the end truly wears it now? If you've made it this far, you've already crossed a threshold few dare to approach, the place where faith, fear, and forbidden truth collide. Now you know the secret Rome tried to bury in 1895, but the question remains. What do you believe really happened to Father Santini? Was he a man haunted by a demon, or a priest consumed by his own guilt? Tell me in the comments, was it possession or punishment? I read every theory, every speculation, and some of them are darker than the story itself. And remember that bonus I promised at the beginning. Here it is. In the Vatican's restricted archives, there's a file labeled Echo 9. No official record links it to Santini, but insiders claim it references a mirror fragment still responding to touch. If you want me to uncover that file in our next story, type below. Open the vault. You see, this channel isn't just about telling dark tales. It's about unearthing the pieces of history others were too afraid to expose, the records rewritten, the confessions erased, the truths sealed in stone and silence. So if you want to keep walking deeper into those forbidden corridors of history, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell, because every week we uncover another secret they swore would never see the light. Type, I want more truth, in the comments if you felt the chill of this story, and let's see how many of us still believe that history's darkest corners deserve to be seen. The next mystery is already waiting in the shadows. And trust me, what's hidden there makes Santini's mirror look almost merciful. Some stories end when the last page turns, but this one refuses to die. The shadow of Father Santini still lingers, on the cracked stones of his demolished church, in the whispers that curl through Roman catacombs, in the quiet moments when candlelight flickers against the wall and seems to breathe. Perhaps the mirror was shattered, but reflections, as we know, never truly vanish. They wait for eyes willing to see. And maybe that's why you're here, because part of you still wonders, what if the church didn't destroy it? What if the last fragment, the one that reflected nothing, wasn't glass at all, but skin? As you sit there listening to this story, think of how many more like it have been erased, names changed, documents burned, voices buried beneath centuries of dust and doctrine. History doesn't end with the truth. It hides it. It tests who dares to go looking. So let this be more than an ending. Let it be an invitation. If you stayed until now, type below, I guard the memory. Because that's what you've done. You've become part of the few who refuse to let forgotten souls fade completely. Next week, we open a new chapter, one that begins not in Rome, but deep beneath the streets of Paris, 1902. A network of tunnels was discovered under a convent that should not have existed. The air was thick with incense. And something else, something that still moved. If you think Santini's mirror was disturbing, wait until you hear about the nun who heard voices from the bones. Thank you for listening, for remembering, and for daring to see what others fear to face. Because here, in this place, we don't just tell stories of the past, we resurrect them. Until next time, keep the candles burning. And whatever you do, don't look away when you see your reflection blink back.